From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined with our producer, Dylan, the Tennessee pal, Fagan. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. We are coming to you semi-live as a hurricane is hitting the U.S., the southeastern U.S., part of which we are based in, and we wanted to get this out as long as we have power. We talked a little bit about the weather because we're super cool and super relevant.
We're not boring,
guys.
We got stories. Hey, how about the weather? No, it actually is appropriate this time. It's kind of a little scary. And we talked about how interesting and non-exact a science meteorology kind of is.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the radar right now, guys, I don't know if you've noticed this. When it's showing, like if you go to weather.com's radar that they display, right? It will show you the storm systems moving north through, as you said, the southeastern part of the U.S., but it doesn't show the hurricane when it's showing you the past up until now. The hurricane pops on screen when it shows you the future, like what's coming, what's about to happen, even though the storm system it's displaying in the past is like right near or around the hurricane. It's the weirdest thing.
What does it mean, Matt? What does it mean?
I don't know.
It means there's a weird Venn diagram and people are portraying it differently, which is not great for the populace.
Well, it makes me wonder in the future if the AI systems that have been used for weather prediction for these types of radar systems, right? Look at what's happened in the past with the radar and then use these intense supercomputers and systems, deep learning systems, to predict what's going to happen. What if those systems start not making up storms, but start displaying
hallucinating storms?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about how those systems can have weird stuff.
I
don't know.
Pre-crime, pre-natural disaster crime.
I'm just happy that all the weather people on TV are having a moment to shine. You love to see it. They don't get their due.
I love it. I love meteorologists. They get a tough time because sometimes they predict the possibility of disasters that people don't fully understand, and they get a hard time either way. So they're doing great work, just like the octopuses that are training fish to hunt with them. That's a true story. They're not doing it. The fish, I mean, are not necessarily consenting to this because the octopus will beat them until it hunts with them. Which is
I remember my octopus teacher. I saw that.
Yeah, right. So check out the news on that. We're going to talk about some very heavy things, some very disturbing things, discoveries, updates, bans. Just so you know, folks, at the end, toward the end, in the third act of this weekly Strange News segment, we are going to talk about state-sponsored murder. But there's so much strange news. We have so much on the way.
And we've returned. We're going to hit a couple updates, guys, and then have a brief thought experiment about a story, Ben, that you brought to us last week that the whole world was watching, I think. So here we go. First of all, do you guys remember that giant cargo ship that crashed into and collapsed Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge in March?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Key Bridge, yeah.
Well, the company that runs that manages that ship as well as owns that ship is in the news again because the sister ship of the Bali, that's the name of the ship that actually crashed into the bridge there, the sister ship, the Maersk, I think is how you'd say it, or Maersk, Maersk, Saltoro, is now in the news because it has been boarded by agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Criminal Investigation Division, and the Coast Guard Investigative Services. Because just like the Dolly, It is alleged or believed, at least by these investigators, that the Maersk Saltoro, just like the Dolly, basically has all kinds of major issues on it. We're talking electrical issues, mechanical issues that mean these vessels, this one just like the Dolly, basically are giant problems floating around in the ocean that could cause a major incident just like the Dolly caused back in March. I'll read you just a little bit of this. There was a lawsuit that was filed on Wednesday, September 18th by the U.S. Justice Department. It alleges that the owners, Grace Ocean Private Limited, and the manager, Synergy Marine, or Synergy Marine Group, both of these companies out of Singapore, they recklessly cut corners and ignore known electrical problems on their vessels, specifically on the Dolly, and that is what caused multiple power issues, which ended up causing the crash that, made a bridge collapse. They're saying that the same kind of things exist on this new ship, or it's not a new ship, it's a sister ship, but is now new to us, right? And the Justice Department is trying to get over $100 million from these companies to pay for all of the stuff that it took to get that bridge basically cleared out and all the debris out of the way so that the port could even open again.
Well, that seems only fair, doesn't it? I mean, it was entirely their fault.
Well, it was, right? So there's a lot of litigation happening right now, attorneys in offices trying to figure out, well, who actually is at fault and why was it not us, right? I mean, that's basically the things that happen after a disaster like this. Because remember, 6 human beings that were working on that bridge died when this occurred. And then if you think about the billions of dollars, remember we were talking about that, the billions of dollars that the city of Baltimore and all of the companies that ship in and out of that port lost.
In revenue, right? Like, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, because nobody could come in or out for several months. It was just a big deal. So from March till June, it was incapacitated.
Yeah, it's funny. A friend of mine staying with me who's a lawyer, and we were talking about this weather situation and the concept of theft, just joking around saying, oh, if my partner's art market is canceled due to weather, then that's technically like theft of her wages or her ability to sell. I mean, you could argue that by negligence alone, this company like defrauded people of their income, defrauded this company of its ability to earn.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Oh, and just in a bit of hopeful news, guys, the Dolly, which remember was like smashed into that bridge and kind of became a part of the bridge there for a little while, it was successfully, quote, extricated and refloated. And as of Thursday, September 19th, it was on a new route headed to China for its first international voyage post-bridge collapse. So at least that ship's still working. Silver lining? I don't know. In the end, this appears to be the Justice Department trying to get money back for a bunch of stuff that it and a bunch of other federal and state agencies went through to fix a huge problem. All right, we've got a second update, you guys. Remember that British tech billionaire, Mike Lynch, who died along with several of his family members and friends, like his daughter, when his super yacht, the Bayesian, sank off the coast of Sicily in August?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's back in the news too, for a bit of a different reason, and it is because, I'm going to read you a quote from this article out of CNN. Specialist divers surveying the wreckage of the $40 million super yacht have asked for heightened security to guard the vessel over concerns that sensitive data locked in its safes may interest foreign governments. What? What? So we've got a super yacht down at the bottom of the ocean where it was found, right? That's where several people met their demise, unfortunately, including the one of the owners of that super yacht, Mike Lynch. According to, quote, you guys are going to love this, sources familiar with the investigation, unquote.
I love those sources. They're always so helpful, aren't they?
Yeah. The Bayesian, this super yacht, may contain highly sensitive data tied to a number of Western intelligence services. What? Sensitive information about Western intelligence services on a ship that was British off the coast of Italy. Interesting. Do you guys have any thoughts on that initially?
Well, it sure makes it seem like this was some kind of hit, right? But also, why didn't they get the stuff? Usually if there's a hit because someone's sitting on important or classified or sensitive information, a person is killed and then the stuff is removed so no one ever finds it. I don't know.
It feels a little weird to me that there would be sensitive data like that on a ship that hangs out in international waters all the time. Why would you have that there? There are probably reasons.
Well, wasn't that part of the conversation? This seemed fishy, like maybe these were high value individuals or people that know stuff, and maybe this was some sort of orchestrated attempt to sink the yacht and make it look like an accident?
Yes, but you asked the right question there, Noel. Why would someone who targeted this ship and the people who were on it, if they weren't going to take that stuff already, right? If the goal wasn't to get that kind of stuff. So the reason why that information's on the ship is because Mike Lynch, was associated with, according to CNN, British, American, and other intelligence services through his various companies, including the cybersecurity company that he founded, Dark Trace. Also, guys, his wife's company, Raytom, Reytom Limited, sorry, that's a second name, Raytom Limited, that company owned the ship, and this person, Mike Lynch's wife, was also an advisor to British Prime Ministers David Cameron and Theresa May. She was a science, technology, and cybersecurity advisor, which means she likely had information, or at least had access to information that was highly sensitive. Who knows if she took any of that or stored any of that? I think that's what these investigators are interested in. The potential that some of that stuff ended up on these, at least according to the authorities, highly secured drives, like heavily encrypted drives that exist in safes that are allegedly watertight, that are now at the bottom of the ocean. Craziness.
It's wild.
But the biggest thing is that law enforcement and these investigative services believe that this information is so, let's say, actionable, maybe, that Russian and Chinese services, special services, would be willing to go down there and attempt to recover it.
Ben, what kind of stuff do you think would fall into that level of concern for all of these other parties?
Noel, do you mean as in what kind of info would need to
would lead to this
gleaned?
level of hubbub?
Like what would incentivize rival powers?
Yes.
Yeah, it's tough because it's the age of information war. So probably the idea is, or the fear is that something there could be leading to not perishable immediate intelligence, but leading to methods of collection, perhaps even, the stinky side of it would be the idea of algorithmic patterns, things that could be used to break encryption would be a great one, especially given the context outlined earlier. I will say also to this point, before we get too James Bond about it, past a certain threshold of wealth, a lot of people kick it naturally with intelligence agencies. Like the tech bros are of great interest to the intel guys. And the other thing is, if this is really a takedown, because we have briefly talked about the possibility of bad faith actors and, whether this is an accident or a manufactured event, there are 15 survivors, right? From the original debacle. Oh,
yeah. Lots of people made it off and got to another ship that was nearby that also happened to be a sailboat. Just remember that. A little weird. Just on the idea of what could be in there, according to CNN, they talked to someone, quote, who asked not to be named, unquote, and that person said that the ship is thought to have watertight safes containing 2 super encrypted hard drives that hold highly classified information, including passcodes and other sensitive data.
There you go.
Yeah, so it's holding the keys to some doors.
Exactly.
And that's what I mean when I say like methods and encryption breaking kind of things. And it is totally possible. It is highly within the realm of plausibility. We do have to also consider a lot of people who were on this boat at this time did not know, what was in these safes. That's the point of safes in general, right? Like, unfortunately, the chef on the yacht, because this was a big enough yacht to have a guy whose job was just to be the chef, he probably died without having any idea of what was contained in here. But to your earlier question, Noel, about the value of the information on these hard drives, we have to remember that international maritime law is a little bit different. I know I sound like Charlie Day talking about bird law, but maritime law is a little different. So there are consequences for powers like Russia or China being apprehended, tried to do a little scoot and boot under scavenger law, even though scavenger law is still kind of a thing. You can get in trouble if you're obviously, I will say, spooking about.
Well, and if it's a crime scene, right? And in this case, it's a crime scene because it's under investigation there by Italian authorities. Who knows what's going to happen, but they are putting all kinds of underwater surveillance and lots of surveillance above the water because it is 164 feet below the surface of the water. So if you got a ship up there, who knows what's going on? You're not going to see any lights if anybody's got a submersible or something down there, or, a team of like essentially SEALs. Crazy, crazy town, y'all. So let's keep an eye on that for sure. Last thing I've got here is going to be super quick. Moving on to a hunch I've got based on the story you brought to us last week, Ben. I've been thinking a lot about the sorts of casual conversations that are being held in the upper echelons of every government on the planet since last week. I imagine the most prominent thing they're talking about is how do we check every single device in our division, in this building, in the state that we operate in, maybe even in the country, to make sure that none of these devices have explosives in them. Because what if there's an enemy of ours that has already orchestrated an attack like this? It just hasn't happened yet. And in that case, it would mean explosives are already in devices. They're just nobody sent a signal yet, right? Well, it just maybe kind of go down to what if they're thinking about vehicles rather than pagers? Because we know from stories that we've talked about in the past that vehicles of all shapes and sizes are manufactured now, at least this is the norm, manufactured in all parts of the world, and then those parts are individually shipped to a place where they're assembled into the vehicle that you know and drive around in. Well, according to Reuters, the U.S. government is very much interested in trying to prevent a specific country from sending both hardware and software to be included in any vehicles that are operated in the United States.
Oh gosh, who could it be?
Gee, I don't know. What country makes a bunch of things that the United States uses? Say it in his accent.
China?
There you go. All right. That's exactly correct. This is out of Reuters. The U.S. Commerce Department is expected on Monday. This was this past Monday that we're recording this. So on the 23rd of September, to propose prohibiting Chinese software and hardware in connected and autonomous vehicles on American roads due to national security concerns, guys. So on connected and autonomous vehicles. It gets a little weird when we talk. Autonomous is pretty simple, right? A vehicle that's going to operate on its own as a part of those rideshare services, or eventually the plans are to have like shipping being automated, at least to a large part. That's one of the things that I was going to say Nikola Tesla. It's one of the things that Tesla has been attempting to do for a long time, getting these very specialized trucks that could actually ship stuff all around the country and not have any humans on them, just doing their thing, their little robot shipping thing. But it also made me think about, guys, vehicles that, let's say, the Secret Service uses to ship around highly important individuals in the government. It makes me think about all types of human beings that are important to the U.S. government continuity that get moved around on vehicles that have Chinese hardware and software in them. And if you go down, well, let me say the article. The article is titled Exclusive, U.S. to propose ban on Chinese software, hardware, and connected vehicles. You will see a quote from Gina Raimondo, Raimondo, who is the United States Commerce Secretary. She was speaking in May of this year, 2024, and she said, quote, "You can imagine the most catastrophic outcome theoretically if you had a couple million cars on the road and the software were disabled." So let's think about that. In that scenario, there are a couple million cars across the United States that in one attack of sorts all become disabled at once, right? Some of those vehicles would be parked. Some of them might be on roads. Some of them might become obstructions. Some of them might be ridden in by important people. That becomes kind of a scary thing. But if you look at the history of specifically the Secret Service and the vehicles that they use, they are primarily GMC vehicles, US-made vehicles, but a lot of these vehicles have Chinese hardware and software in them, specifically GMC vehicles, guys. Like Cadillacs, like the limos that presidents get driven around in all the time. They would be affected by this.
Interesting. I heard a piece on the radio a week or so ago about this exact thing, and the person that was talking, the expert whose name escapes me, was saying how there aren't that many fully Chinese manufactured vehicles available in U.S. markets, but they didn't mention all of the systems that you're talking about, Matt.
Yeah, components that are inside these systems. Anyway, it just made me think about that, guys. I just wondered if you had any ideas, but I know we're running long on time here, so maybe we'll save our thoughts for a different time, and we'll ask what you think about these three stories. We'll tell you how to contact us at the end of the episode, but for now, let's hear a few words from our sponsor, and we'll be right back with more strange news.
And we return with another piece of strange news. This one starts off pretty sad, but stick with us, folks. It has a happy ending. Oakland, California, 1951. A little boy named Luis Armando Albino, 6 years old at the time, was playing in a park and was abducted. A woman on February 21st, 1951, lured him away from the West Oakland Park where he'd been playing with his brother, promising him in Spanish, Puerto Rican boy, that she was going to buy him candy. And it's just, gosh, that whole concept of like luring kids with candy is such a trope, but it's a trope for a reason.
Tropes are only tropes because they were true at some point.
100%. So fast forward to the modern day. So the woman in question took this minor child on a flight to the East Coast, the entire opposite side of the country, and he ended up, through whatever means, it does appear to be trafficking. I imagine he was perhaps sold, or there was a fee paid or something. But the good news is he was raised by a couple, and does not appear that there was any allegations of abuse from this couple who raised him as their own. Officials and family members have not commented exactly where on the East Coast this took place. But fast forward about 70 years, y'all, to the modern day. Albino, I think is how it's pronounced, stayed missing. His family members left behind, never forgot about him. They, kept pictures hung of him in their homes and the homes of their relatives. His mother passed away in 2005, but apparently, according to other relatives, including his niece, never gave up hope. Maybe not that they would ever be reunited with the boy, but that he was still alive.
Can you imagine the gravity of that burden to bear?
I cannot, as a parent and as someone who's has other kids in my life who aren't even mine by blood, it is just the most terrifying. The not knowing is the most terrifying thing. I mean, of course, obviously knowing that your child was killed is horrific in and of itself, but there's something about the games your mind plays with you for that long.
Imagine the mother, 50 plus years, 54 years of just knowing your son is gone, and then you pass away believing your son is just gone, but you never get closure in any way.
No. Oakland police, by the way, this reporting comes from an article by the Associated Press, and it was picked up, and there have been other pieces, but I do think this is quite a good summation of the story. Oakland PD acknowledged that it was actions of the family that led to this case going from unsolved and cold as they come to being essentially reignited, with some hope. And most importantly, the efforts of Albino's niece, the now 63-year-old Alida Aliquin. Essentially what happened was the following. She is credited by police with playing an integral role, this is a quote from the Oakland police, in finding her uncle, and that the outcome of this story is what they, as police investigators, strive for. So let's get to the good part. Oakland Tribune articles that reported on the disappearance reported that police and soldiers from a local army base, as well as the Coast Guard and other city employees, participated in a massive search for the missing boy all across the San Francisco Bay Area. The San Francisco Bay and other waterways were dragged and searched, looking for the worst, of course, body. His brother, Roger Albino, was interrogated multiple times, potentially as a suspect. Investigators ultimately dismissed him as a suspect because he stood by his story about seeing that woman. This was the brother, by the way, who was with, Albino when he was abducted. So can you imagine that being your brother being taken, you blaming yourself, of course, as you would naturally, whether that's true or not, and then being interrogated by the police, blaming you for his disappearance, or maybe even implying that you had something to do with it. So let's go back to Aliquin, who first got an inkling that her uncle might actually be still alive. That came in 2020, where she, just for fun, as she put it, took an online DNA test. It's not mentioned exactly which one it was, but we've certainly seen these online DNA tests being the subject of a lot of criticism, a lot of controversy in terms of just the companies that offer these, just buying and selling your DNA information, your data, and all of that. Certainly there is the sketchy side of this. But just the same, she took the online DNA test, which showed, thankfully, because this other individual was in the database, a 22% match with a man living on the other side of the country who did ultimately turn out to be her uncle, Luis Armando Albino, that 6-year-old boy who was abducted in 1951. Pretty incredible. In early 2024, she and her daughters started to search for this man. On a visit to the Oakland Public Library, she looked through some of the microfilms of the reporting from when the abduction took place, and she actually found one that had a picture of Luis and Roger, the brothers, which she was able to kind of look to as a sign that she was on the right track, because this person that she was connected with looked like he could potentially be a match. And she went to the Oakland police with this information. And the investigators, in a what one could argue would be kind of like exception to what would normally happen, it seems, in these kind of situations where someone comes with information on a long dead case, you often hear about people kind of being, pushed aside and not taken seriously. So kudos to the Oakland Police Department for taking this information seriously and opening a new missing person investigation. Oakland Police very recently, last week, this is a brand new story, said that the missing persons case is now closed, but that they and the FBI are still considering the kidnapping portion of it to be an ongoing investigation. Now that Luis has been found on the East Coast providing DNA samples, it is proven that he is in fact the missing boy, because Aliquin's mother also provided a DNA sample. So with 100% certainty.
Talk about a family reunion. And I love that there is some closure here. I went on mute just so I could hear this story in full. Noel, do we have any indication? This is something a lot of the audience will ask. Do we have any indication on possible identities or motivations of the original kidnappers all those years ago?
No, it seems like it might be too soon to know, but it does appear that they are interested in that very same question, Ben, and finding out what, can be determined, from questioning Luis and describing this woman who abducted him all those years ago, 70 years ago. I believe she's been described as having, not that this matters today, but having worn a bandana, some vague descriptions of her appearance. But again, 70 years ago, chances are pretty good with Luis now being in his 70s.
He's like 79, right?
Yeah, exactly. That this woman would be probably long deceased. But then the question does become, Ben, was this part of some sort of greater organization that perhaps God only knows is still operating? It does seem that there could be information that could be valuable even this many years later. So yeah, that's the gist of that story. I just think it's such a fantastic and powerful statement on never giving up hope, as hard as it might be. There's a quote from Aliquin the niece saying, when they reunited, we didn't start crying until after the investigators left. I grabbed my mom's hand and said, we found him. I was ecstatic. Aliquin went on to describe her mother and other relatives being reunited with Luis as well, saying they grabbed each other and had a really tight, long hug. They sat down and just talked. She said, discussing the day of the kidnapping, their military service, and more.
And it reminds me one important point for all of us listening along. Statistically, unfortunately, some of our fellow conspiracy realists may have firsthand experience with similar situations. Think of the horrors of the residential schools. Think of the cultural erasure that has occurred in the Western world, as well as many other parts of the globe. One thing about DNA testing and the DNA technology that is yet to be fully legislated is, although it poses frightening implications, it also poses, as you pointed out, Noel, these amazing opportunities, right, for people to learn more about where they come from, learn who was lost, and maybe reconnect with those folks. And I think there's a great power and poetry to that. I'm curious, what do you guys think? Do you think that we have someone in the audience tonight who may have encountered something similar? I'm thinking through my head, and I know we've had fellow listeners who have talked at some length or sent us correspondence regarding finding family they didn't know they had or that they supposed was gone forever. Do you guys think anybody in the audience tonight might have a similar story?
Highly likely, whether it's this extreme a case or something more like what you were describing, Ben. I think it's a lot more common than people might think.
Yeah, especially with some of the cases of, fraud where a doctor would impregnate multiple women when they would come in to, partake in IVF or something like that. You never know. All of us might have, some kind of siblings out there.
Agreed. Yeah. And I mean, like I said, there's it's a sticky wicket with the DNA testing for profit and, what's being done with that information. And it was one of those things where it was such a shiny new thing when it was first offered and everyone was excited to participate in it without really thinking about the consequences. But we've also seen the flip side of that, the positive side of that with cold cases being solved. Matt, I believe you brought a case. Oh, no, it was a Golden State Killer, right? Like it was a case involving a DNA site that identified a suspect for the Golden State Killer, and that was determined to be accurate, right?
Yes, correct. GEDmatch, I believe, was the name of that company that did that.
There you go. So it's certainly something that we've seen positive things come out of. There's also, of course, a dark side to data brokering and all of that good stuff that we've talked about at length on the show. So nice to hear a story like this, such a sad beginning, ending on such a positive note. So please, if anyone out there does have experience like this, being reunited with long lost, possibly thought dead family members, please do send us your stories. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com. We'd really love to hear it and share your stories on an upcoming listener mail if you are comfortable with that. In the meantime, let's take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsor, and then come back with one more piece of strange news.
And we have returned. As mentioned at the top, this is the part of the weekly strange news segment that may be disturbing and as such not appropriate for all listeners. Want to get that disclaimer out of the way. We'll end with a fun thing, but before we get to this horrific story, let's get a little bit of paranoia in the chat. Guys, did you see that there was a new study confirming some of the world's most common smart TVs are taking multi-second snapshots of what you watch?
Is this like Roku specific? Them offering so much of the software operating system for a lot of smart TVs. I'm curious.
Yeah. For a while, Noel, I've been wondering why television prices seem to buck the overall trend of rising cost in electronics. Why the TVs become the loss leader. It's because
you're the product, baby.
Yeah, popular smart TV models made by Samsung and LG take snapshots of what you're watching every second, even if, and get this, even if they're being used as external displays for your laptop or video game console.
So much Elden Ring.
When we say snapshot, literally like screen grabs? Yeah. Wow.
Screenshot with associated metadata. I want to give a shout out. Credit's very important where it's due. Shout out to Jeremy Sue over at New Scientist with this information. That's where we found it, published 24 September, just this month. And this is a dumb one, but a fun update. We've been on this kick, as longtime listeners know, with drugs hidden in weird things. What do we have? We had
fake watermelons, like paper mache looking square watermelons.
Oh, and then there was like the crates of something at the farmer's market. Little south
guitar amplifiers at Guitar Center.
Guitar amplifiers.
Yeah, celery, squash. We got a huge list. Green beans, giant vats of jalapeno paste.
What happened to just smuggle them in your butt like the old days, you know?
Right. Well, you can't do the volume. I guess people's butts are getting smaller.
Can't find a good drug mule these days.
You can't even get a regular mule. The prices are crazy. So our quick drugs in stuff update. A German supermarket, not the authorities, a German supermarket discovered 7 million euros worth of cocaine hidden in crates of bananas. So if you are living in Germany and you're getting a weird vibe off your bananas, get to the local news.
There's a Ween song called Bananas and Blow, and I think that's appropriate soundtrack material for this story.
You know what? It's weird, Noel, because I'll hear people say a Ween reference, and half the time I think they're making it up because the song sounds so specific.
Oh, well, they're kooky. They've got some kooky stuff.
Okay.
Those Ween guys.
But every time I check it out, it turns out to be the case. And speaking of cases, this is the trigger warning 321. A few days before we came to record this strange news segment, the state of Missouri, despite overwhelming protest, executed a man named Marcellus Williams. This will be familiar to us because I believe in June of this year, we talked about this a bit on Strange News. They had set the execution date, the state of Missouri, and they set that date for September 24th. Marcellus Williams was executed by lethal injection. When I say there was a massive outcry, the The crime for which he was executed was the stabbing of Felicia Gale on August 11th, 1998. It was a homicide. The two witnesses who placed him at the scene have passed away, one of whom I believe recanted their statement. We talked about some of the stickiness of that. The family of Felicia Gale also requested clemency from Marcellus Williams. They did not believe the case held water. The DNA evidence did not match. We talked about that. It was contaminated, something that occurred between the time we first spoke about this and this evening. It's unprecedented. The prosecution and the defense issued a joint statement saying, we believe this man is innocent. We learned about this initially through things like our friends at Wrongful Conviction and Lava for Good, our friends at the Innocence Project. What is astonishing here, and I'm sure a lot of us have seen this on social media, is that it appears that everything that would have led to reasonable doubt or an appeal, right? Or at least a delay in execution, it was ignored. This guy was following through the correct steps of the system, but still every possible avenue was treated as though it didn't matter. Now, have you guys heard about this case? Have you guys seen this bumping around on the
I remember from the lava
media
panel that I had not heard the execution took place until just now. It's heartbreaking.
I've just been seeing Maggie Frayling, I think is how you say her last name, talk about it a lot.
Yeah. One of the hosts of Wrongful Conviction, along with Jason Flom. I wanted to learn how this could happen. Like, what is the rationale? Because ultimately, the governor could have given clemency, right? Or the state Supreme Court could have responded to these issues. This is going to be disturbing. We will read in part the statement of Missouri Governor Mike Parson in his justification of this murder of what I believe to be an innocent man. Governor Parson says in part, capital punishment cases are some of the hardest issues we have to address in the governor's office, but when it comes down to it, I follow the law and trust the integrity of our judicial system. Mr. Williams has exhausted due process and every judicial avenue, including over 15 hearings attempting to argue his innocence and overturn his conviction. No jury, no court, including at the trial, appellate, and Supreme Court levels, have ever found merit in Mr. Williams' innocence claims. At the end of the day, his guilty verdict and sentence of capital punishment were upheld. Nothing from the real facts of this case have led me to believe in Mr. Williams' innocence. As such, Mr. Williams' punishment will be carried out as ordered by the Supreme Court. And then he goes on. Well, let's stop there. What do you guys think about that rationale? Seeing some head shakes.
Sorry, I'm reading the message from the governor there, and it's just Sorry, I'm still kind of processing all of it.
I mean, same. It's given what we know and what we know about cases like this and how so often justice is not carried out, for something to have this level of finality to it, I think is just like the ultimate head shaking kind of moment.
Yeah. And I love that point. The victim's family said, don't kill this person, not because, we're practicing forgiveness, but because we don't think he's the murderer. Right, the DNA evidence doesn't match. Further, there was a shoe print, fingerprints, hair found at the scene, none of which matched Williams. I cannot overemphasize how rare and extraordinary it is for the prosecutor's office and the defense office to say, "Don't do this."
Yeah,
this is not how justice is supposed to work.
I wonder if it has anything to do with the severity, like the brutality of the murder of Felicia, because she was stabbed 43 times. You know, when she was discovered, basically by the crime scene investigators or the first responders, she had the knife still lodged in her neck.
Jesus Christ.
And you can imagine that kind of brutal crime, at least in the beginning, I think is the thing we talked about. In the beginning, there was such pressure to find whoever the heck did that, you know, something so terrible. Not that murdering anyone at any time isn't awful, but that kind of thing, it's just, there's something inhuman about it. And I imagine that pressure was tremendous to put somebody behind bars for doing this. And I think it's that thing that you guys talked about on the panel with Lava for Good. It's almost like once law enforcement starts going down a path and like a district attorney signs up for a case, it's like you can't take the wheels off the thing.
Critical mass.
The case was reviewed by not just the top legal boffins in Missouri, but by our own SCOTUS, the United States Supreme Court, just hours before the execution. And the Supreme Court ultimately denied the request. So this did get all the way to the top judicial authorities in the land. However, I do take issue, I think we all can, with another part of Governor Parsons' statement, which we'll read part of it. Let's figure out how we feel about this. Parson, in co-signing the state-sponsored murder of an innocent man, said, "I also want to add how deeply disturbed we've been about how this case has been covered. Mr. Williams's attorney chose to muddy the waters about DNA evidence." Claims, sorry, my tone is very snarky here. Claims of which courts have repeatedly rejected, yet, says Parson, some media outlets and activist groups have continued such claims without so much of a mention of the judicial proceedings or an unbiased analysis of the facts. I would just implore the media to do their due diligence and not rely on the sole claims of individuals who have a personal or monetary stake in this case. So he's also kind of saying fake news. Is that what he's doing?
No.
Like it's just a pretty half-hearted deflection.
It feels incredibly unclean. You know, I might sound like a broken record or repeating what we said in June, but this just does not make sense.
Yeah, I just as a devil's advocate position, I'm reading this thing from the governor that was written. I think at least what Mike Parson is saying here is, look at all of these bullet pointed things that I've also included at the end of my statement. These are all things that, at least in the eyes of me and the people I represent in my state, this is why we are executing this person. And it includes things like Felicia Gale's personal items were found in the trunk of Mr. Williams' car. And I don't know all the details of the case. I didn't watch any of the stuff. I don't know anything about it. I imagine if there's a fact, something like that, I don't know. I think you make up your mind sometimes with law enforcement. Yeah, I see that. And there's a narrative, and I appreciate you looking at that. So you can find the statement at governor.mo.gov. Again, came out September 24th, just a few days as we record. And there is, this is what the governor sees as the justification for this. I would challenge the governor, however, to respond to the idea that this is spinning a narrative, given that some of these bullet points are based on witness testimony, one of whom, Henry Cole, was paid $5,000 to help spin the web. And Laura Asaro, who named Marcellus as the culprit, is one of the primary sources that upon which the conviction rests. Now, we're not saying anybody is perfect, nor a paragon of, I'm thinking of synonyms for perfect. I lost my thesaurus. Not only is it inconvenient, it's also inconvenient. So, what a dumb joke. The thing here is that we see inconclusive evidence. And when we're talking about something like the state exercising the power to end a human life,
right, non-consensually, then this is beyond the realm of reasonable, suspicion or probable cause. You have to fucking know for sure if you're doing this.
Well, what is the reason to just go ahead and carry out that sentence rather than just hold? What's the big problem? Is it going to cost the state too much money?
For a prosecutor.
Don't you think it comes down to politics, or it came down to somebody making the call, whether it be a governor or what have you? Like, I mean, just let's put it behind us, that kind of thinking, I don't know.
As long as it's not a political move. Can you imagine, like, it's a governor that's going to be up for re-election and wants to show that he's hard on crime?
That's what I'm
something?
saying.
I did some looking into.
To a degree, it could be that.
Yeah, tough on crime is a big selling point in Missouri polity. Yeah, these are incredibly valid and disturbingly relevant questions. These are the questions that we shouldn't have to be asking, yet we must, because in a very real sense, there are conspiracies afoot. The justice system is in intense need of repair in the United States. I think many of us listening tonight can agree that aspects of it are broken, regardless of where you find yourself in the spectrum of pro or anti-death penalty, regardless of where you find yourself in the idea of, mandatory sentencing or other policy things. Also, by the way, related to last meals, to spend the human moment, Williams had chicken wings and tater tots, and he was a poet because he had been incarcerated. He found religion. He was a religious leader in the prison system.
Wow.
And his last, you can find his poetry online, and I'll say it objectively, he's very well written. And his last statement, which is terrifying, that there's a form for this. They apparently gave him a form where you write out your last statement, and it looks like a worksheet that you would get in grade school. And his last statement was, "All praise be to Allah in every situation." And, we talk a lot about funny, weird stories, who's putting drugs in what, and and what are the octopus up to this time? But but for this, I think there's something enormous at play. Noel, Matt, this is the third person executed in Missouri in recent history. The people involved in the system are we're begging the system not to execute this man, right? To at least re-examine the case. And the system said no. And I think that's a dangerous precedent. Am I being alarmist, or is
No, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I think we got to take away the state's ability to kill people. If you're gonna be killing people, you got to be a military. There has to be a civil war.
Matt.
Or it has to be a
slippery slope in a different direction, buddy.
God, I'm so up to my neck. I was talking about this in group chat. I'm so up to my neck in weird Middle East news. That's right. There's more than America to the world. We can't wait to hear your thoughts on this, folks. We had some great correspondence about the death penalty, when it may or may not be necessary, how to know a person's guilt or innocence, and the problems with the justice system, not just here in the States, but abroad. And we can't wait to hear more from you regarding this. We don't want to end on a negative note. So
let's talk about Russia's rules of engagement with nukes. Sorry.
Thermobaric. Hey, thermobaric is like tag and base, not quite a nuke. But here is something I thought would make everybody a little bit happier as we head out to the hurricane evening. That snowmobile guy we mentioned a while back who crashed into a Black Hawk helicopter got $3 million.
Hey,
Boom.
You love to hear it.
You love to see it. So adjusted for inflation, I think that's something like $250,000. I don't know. Depending on when you go to the grocery store. But
yeah. But he did ask for $9.5 million. And he
Well,
only
yeah,
got 30.
yeah, that's how negotiation works. You know what I mean? Always ask big. So with this, folks, thank you as always for tuning in to Strange News. We will be back with listener mail. We've got episodes. You are our favorite part of the show. Please stay safe out there. Give us your thoughts on everything, including leads for new investigations. We try to be easy to find online.
Boy, do we ever. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook, where we have our Facebook group, Here's Where It Gets Crazy. Also on YouTube, where you can find video content galore to enjoy at your leisure. And finally, on X, FKA Twitter. On Instagram and TikTok, we are Conspiracy Stuff Show.
If you want to call us, call 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, it's a voicemail system. You've got 3 minutes. Say whatever you'd like. Do please give yourself a cool nickname. We don't care what it is. And let us know if we can use your name and message on the air. If you got more to say than could fit in a message, why not instead shoot us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the entities that read every single piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware, yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. Shout out to Humorous Harry. Jesus, did you see that? And also, give us your favorite palindromes. I've been blowing up our group chats. With apologies to you, Noel, because you had to sit through this already.
Yeah, I love it.
New favorite palindrome is Satan oscillate my metallic sonatas. Come on.
Ooh.
Come on.
It's incredible.
It's hard to believe it's a palindrome, but it is. Except for the comma.
Yeah, I sent it to you with a comma, but the proper way to do it is without punctuation, without the period.
Got it.
At the end. So Satan oscillate my metallic sonatas. This is not a code phrase, hopefully. And hopefully we're not launching nukes just yet. But just in case, get your emails in. Join us here in the dark. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.